Hello, and welcome to our first 3.2 video. This is actually not in section 3.2. This is a review of some basic algebra skills that you're going to need in 3.2, and we're just going to do a quick factoring review here. So this isn't going to be like teaching you how to factor things, and it's it's more like these are the basic skills to just remind you of things you hopefully already knew. And if this all looks really scary and foreign and you don't remember how to do this kind of factoring stuff, I'm going to recommend doing some extra work on Khan Academy to get factoring practice and factoring instruction, because you're going to need that before this section. So anyways, this first one is one for you to do. We just want to multiply all of these out. I'll do the first one, and then I recommend pausing it at some point to try to do these on your own. But anyways, here's the first one. I'm going to take this 3x here and use a distributive rule to distribute it in here, multiplying each of these two terms by 3x. So that gives you 3x times x minus 3x times 2, and x times x is x squared. So you can write that as 3x squared minus 6x. And that is now multiplied. Now, that was the goal here. Factoring is the process of going from this to that kind of original problem. So if I said to factor 3x squared minus 6x, that would mean to write it as a product of two factors being multiplied, like you have here. So factoring and multiplying are just opposites. So with this one, we can do the same idea. Again, you should do these on your own just for practice, just to make sure you can, and then use my solutions as a way to check your answers. So once you've done that, I'm going to do the same concept here. I'm going to take that 3, it's just now it's going to be 3x plus 7. We're going to distribute into these two terms. So you can write that as 3x plus 7 times x minus 3x plus 7 times 2. I bet you're not used to doing it this way. You're probably skipping these steps and foiling, and that's okay too. So now I'm going to use the distributive property here again to distribute the x into these two. So it's going to be 3x squared plus 7x, just from those two. And then over here, I'm going to distribute the 2 into these. And keep in mind that you have a minus here. So we need to make sure that we subtract things here. So the 2 times 3x will make minus 6x. And we're also going to be subtracting this whole thing too, because we're distributing that minus in. So it's going to give us minus 14. And then you can combine these two like terms. 7x minus 6x is just x. So you can write this as 3x squared plus x minus 14. And that is now multiplied. Okay, with this one, you might have tried to turn this into x squared plus 9. This is not x squared plus 9. There is no distributive rule for exponents. But what we can do is just rewrite it as what it means to square something is to multiply it by itself. So this is the same thing as x plus 3 times itself, x plus 3. And you don't really have to do this whole double distributive rule thing. You can just FOIL, because that's probably what you're used to. So that means doing the x times x and x times 3. That will give you x squared plus 3x. And then when we multiply this 3 by x and this 3 by 3, that will give you plus 3x plus 9. And then you can just combine like terms to write it as x squared plus 6x plus 9. And that is now the multiplied out version of that. Same thing here, we're just going to FOIL this. So let's see, we're going to have that y times y and that y times 4. That will make y squared plus 4y. And with this one, we're going to do negative 4 times y here, because that negative 4 is negative. That gives you minus 4y. And then negative 4 times positive 4 is minus 16. And then the 4y and minus 4y cancel out. That just gives you 0. So you can just write this whole thing as y squared minus 16. Okay, so that's just a quick review about multiplying. It's good practice to do this to help you factor things, because again, factoring is like when we start with one of these answers that we have here and try to go backwards to write it as a product of two things being multiplied. So let's try that here. Again, I recommend pausing this first to try it on your own, and then seeing my solutions in a minute. After you've done that, here we go. We're going to take this thing here and see what is the greatest common factor of these two terms. So out of these two, what is we call that the GCF that we can take out? That needs to be something that goes evenly into each of these. So 4 goes into 4, and it also goes into 12. So we're going to have a 4 there, but we could also include an x, because there's an x here and x cubed here. So it's always a good step to first factor out the GCF. So in this case, that means write the 4x on the outside. And then we want to multiply that by two terms in here that will come out to these things. So once we distribute the 4x into something here, we want to get 4x cubed, 4x to the power 3. So that means we need two more x's. That's going to be x squared, because x times x squared will give you x to the power 3. And here we just need to multiply this by 3. And that should work. If you check by multiplying, if you do the 4x times x squared plus 4x times 3 using the distributive rule, you should get your original thing. Here, I'm just showing that work. Now for this one, it's tricky when you have a trinomial. The basic idea is this is a trinomial, means it has 3 terms here. We're going to try to put something here that has an x plus something times another binomial with x plus something, and we want to make it work out to become that thing. So if you think about how this works in general, let's say this is an a here and this is a b here, then foiling this out is going to give you x squared, that's the x times x, plus ax plus bx when you do the inner and outer parts. And that's and then also plus ab when you do the last parts. And the ax plus bx, you could just combine those like terms and write that as a plus b times x. And so the goal is that this a plus b should be the 8, and the b times a, the ab, that should be the product of these. That should be 15. And let's see, what are two numbers you can add up to 8 and multiply to get 15, that would be 3 and 5 should do it. And you can always check by multiplying, by foiling it out again, and that will work. So I'm going to put a box around it. All right. This one, it's a little trickier when you have negative numbers. And so let's think. We want two numbers that multiply to make a negative 20. So if your AB is negative 20, that means one must be positive and the other negative, because it takes a positive number times a negative number to make a negative number. And then if they add up to -8, well, we have to figure out a way to make them add up to -8. And you can try some things that might work, that might not work. You might try, I don't know, +4 and then -5. And if you FOIL it out, those do multiply to make -20, but they don't add up to -8. So that doesn't work. You could try, oh, you might say, oh, what about 10 and -2? That sounds reasonable. But then you realize if you do 10x minus 2x, that would give you +8x. So maybe we just need to switch the signs and do -10 and +2. And if you check that by foiling it out, it should work. All right, this one is trickier, and it will be a lot trickier if you didn't first factor out the GCF. So I'm going to take my own advice here and factor that out first, and that'll mean writing this as, let's see, what is the GCF here? These are all even numbers, so you can definitely take out a 2. What will be left is 2 times what is 6x squared? That would be 3x squared. 2 times 13, -13 would make this work. And then 2 times 4 will make 8. Okay. And it still has this 3 here. That makes it tricky. My basic advice is just, well, we're going to leave the 2 here on the outside, and we're going to try to get a couple of binomials that we can put in here. If these two things here are going to multiply to get 3x squared, one of them should be 3x and the other one should be x. That will make the 3x squared. Now, we want these two numbers here still need to multiply to make 4. But when we FOIL it out, we're going to do one of them gets multiplied by 3 and the other one doesn't. So to check if it works, my advice for doing this is guess and check. So for example, you might say 2 and 2. And if you FOIL that out, you're going to get 2x plus 2 times 3x is 6x. So that will give you 2x plus 6x is not -13x. And then when you see it's, oh, -13, they're both going to have to be negative. So maybe try -2 and -2. It'll give you -2x minus 6x is -8x. That doesn't quite work. You can keep trying things until you end up with 1 and 4. So let's check that. If you do -x and then 3 times -4 will make -12x. That looks like it will work. So here's like what the checking work would look like. We'd have, I'll leave the 2 alone, and then it's 3x squared when we do the 3x times x, minus x is the negative 1 times x. Negative 4 times 3x will be negative 12x. And then negative 4 times negative 1 will make plus 4. And that checks out. That's what we want. So this is our solution. And it might take a lot of guesses and a lot of guessing and checking, but that's okay. You're getting practice foiling. It will take some time. So if this is difficult for you, if you don't remember how to do this from the last algebra class you took in high school or last semester, then I'm going to recommend that you get a lot of extra practice watching some, you could either watch some videos on Khan Academy for instruction, and I'm also going to give you a link for where you can practice these kinds of things on Khan Academy.